Help us reach 1,000 subscribers on our new channel Lesbian Stories. We hope you enjoy the story. The pulsing bass of velvet lights throbbed through my bones as I nursed my watered-down whiskey, scanning the crowd. Another night undercover in Lexington's hottest LGBTQ club. Another step closer to cracking this case wide open. At least that's what I kept telling myself. "Hey sugar, want some company?" A sultry voice purred in my ear. I turned, ready with my practiced smile and gentle rejection, when the whole damn club erupted into chaos. Two muscled titans crashed into the bar beside me, fists flying. Glasses shattered, people screamed, and I found myself caught in the middle of a full-blown brawl. Just fucking perfect. As I ducked a wayward punch, my eyes locked onto the stage. There, bathed in a soft purple glow, stood a vision that made my breath catch. Blonde hair cropped short and edgy, curves that could stop traffic, and eyes that seemed to see right through the mayhem. The dancer, Claudia, if I remembered the billboard right, commanded attention without even trying. I couldn't look away, which is probably why I didn't see the bar stool coming at my head until it was too late. "Watch out!" A blur of motion, and suddenly I was on the floor, a warm body pressed against mine. Claudia. She'd tackled me out of harm's way, her face inches from mine. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just us. Then reality came crashing back as a masked figure burst through the doors waving a gun. "Nobody move!" he screamed. Panic erupted. People scrambled for exits, trampling each other in their desperation. I reached for my concealed weapon, but Claudia's hand on my wrist stopped me. "Don't," she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. "You'll get yourself killed." Before I could argue, she was on her feet, positioning herself between me and the gunman. What the hell was she doing? "Hey, asshole," Claudia called out, her voice steady. "You picked the wrong night to mess with my girls." The robber whirled, gun trained on her. My heart lodged in my throat. This wasn't how it was supposed to go down. I was the cop, damn it. I should be protecting her. But Claudia, she was magnificent. With a dancer's grace, she sidestepped, drawing his attention away from the cowering crowd. Her eyes never left his, a mix of defiance and calculation in her gaze. "You want money?" she asked, her tone almost bored. "Fine. But you gotta go through me first." I tensed, ready to spring into action, but Claudia had it under control. As the gunman lunged, she pivoted, using his momentum against him. In a flash, she had him disarmed and pinned. Security finally showed up, restraining the would-be robber. As the adrenaline faded, I found myself staring at Claudia in awe. She caught my eye and winked, a crooked smile playing on her lips. "You okay there, sugar?" she asked, extending a hand to help me up. I took it, ignoring the spark that shot through me at her touch. "Yeah, thank you. That was incredible." Claudia shrugged, but I could see the pride in her eyes. "All in a night's work. Though usually, my heroics are limited to the stage." I laughed, surprising myself. "Well, I owe you one. Can I buy you a drink?" She studied me for a moment, something unreadable in her gaze. "Rain check? I've got a show to finish." With a final smile that left me oddly breathless, she sauntered back towards the stage. As I watched her go, I knew I was in trouble. This wasn't part of the plan. Getting close to a potential witness was one thing, but this felt different, dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with my case. I downed the rest of my drink, trying to shake off the lingering warmth of Claudia's touch. One thing was certain, my undercover stint at Velvet Lights just got a hell of a lot more complicated. A week after the Velvet Lights incident, I found myself knee-deep in mud, cursing my commitment to this damn undercover op. The environmental cleanup drive seemed like a perfect way to blend in, but I hadn't counted on Lexington's wetlands being quite so wet. "Having fun yet?" a familiar voice called out, laced with amusement. I looked up, squinting against the sun, to see none other than Claudia Monroe grinning down at me from dry land. "Oh yeah, time of my life," I deadpanned, trying to ignore the way my heart rate picked up at the sight of her. "What are you doing here?" She quirked an eyebrow. "I organized this little shindig, sugar. Didn't expect to see you, though. Didn't peg you for the tree-hugging type." I shrugged, finally managing to extract myself from the mud. "There's a lot you don't know about me." "Clearly," Claudia mused, her eyes trailing over my mud-caked form. "Well, grab a trash bag. We've got a wetland to save." As we worked side by side, I couldn't help but steal glances at her. In the daylight, away from the neon glow of the club, Claudia was different. Still stunning, but softer somehow, more real. "So," I ventured, breaking the companionable silence. "Burlesque dancer by night, environmental crusader by day. You're full of surprises." Claudia laughed, a rich sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Life's too short for just one passion, don't you think? Besides, someone's gotta look out for the little guys." She gestured to a group of frogs hopping nearby. I snorted. Right, because the frogs can't fight City Hall themselves. Her eyes flashed, a hint of steel beneath the charm. "You'd be surprised how much damage unchecked development can do. These wetlands are vital to the ecosystem. But I guess that doesn't matter much to people who only care about lining their pockets." The vehemence in her voice caught me off guard. "Whoa, easy there. I didn't mean to offend your amphibian friends." Claudia sighed, running a hand through her short blonde hair. "Sorry, I get a bit worked up about this stuff. It's just important, you know?" I did know. That passion, that fire, it was the same drive I felt about my job, about protecting people. Even if Claudia didn't know the real reason I was here, I found myself respecting her dedication. As the day wore on, our banter continued. We argued about the best way to remove an old tire, my brute force approach versus her more strategic maneuvering, debated the merits of various environmental policies, and swapped stories about the weirdest things we'd found during cleanups. It was nice, comfortable in a way I hadn't expected. But as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the wetlands, reality came crashing back. "Listen," Claudia said, her tone suddenly serious. "A bunch of us are grabbing drinks at the Green Leaf after this. You should come." I hesitated. Getting closer to Claudia could be useful for my investigation, but the way my pulse quickened at her invitation had nothing to do with work. "I don't know," I hedged. "I'm not really the socializing type." Claudia rolled her eyes. "Come on, live a little. One drink won't kill you." She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Besides, I still owe you for that rain check at the club." Before I could formulate a response, she was already walking away, calling over her shoulder, "See you at 8, sugar." I watched her go, a mix of anticipation and dread swirling in my gut. This was a bad idea. I knew it was. But as I headed home to shower off the mud and grime, I couldn't quite bring myself to regret saying yes. The Green Leaf was packed when I arrived, the after-work crowd in full swing. I spotted Claudia at the bar, laughing with a group of people I vaguely recognized from the cleanup. She caught my eye and waved me over, a smile lighting up her face. "You made it," she exclaimed, grabbing my hand and pulling me into the circle. "Everyone, this is Eva." "Eva, everyone." I nodded awkwardly, acutely aware of Claudia's fingers still intertwined with mine. She finally let go to grab a drink for me, and I tried to ignore the loss I felt at the absence of her touch. As the night wore on, I found myself relaxing. Claudia's friends were a diverse, passionate bunch, and the conversation flowed easily. But my eyes kept drifting back to her, the way she gestured animatedly when making a point, the curve of her neck as she threw her head back in laughter. "Earth to Eva," Claudia's voice broke through my reverie. We were alone at the bar now, the others having drifted away or headed home. "You've been staring. See something you like?" I felt heat rise to my cheeks, caught off guard by her directness. I was just thinking." "Dangerous pastime," she teased, leaning in closer. "Care to share with the class?" Maybe it was the alcohol, or the way the low light caught the blue of her eyes, but I found myself being honest. "I was thinking how different you are here. From the club, I mean. It's like 2 different people." Claudia's smile faltered for a moment, something unreadable flashing across her face. "Aren't we all different versions of ourselves in different places?" I nodded, thinking of my own double life. "I suppose we are." She studied me for a long moment, then suddenly stood. "Come on," she said, holding out her hand. "I want to show you something." Against my better judgment, I took it, letting her lead me out into the warm spring night. As we walked, hand in hand, down the quiet streets of Lexington, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line, one I wasn't sure I'd be able to step back from. But with Claudia's fingers laced through mine and the promise of the unknown ahead, I found I didn't much care. Claudia led me through the winding streets of Lexington, the night air thick with the scent of blooming dogwoods. We ended up at a small, dimly lit art gallery tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. It's closed, I pointed out, but Claudia just winked and pulled out a set of keys. Perks of being friends with the owner, she said, ushering me inside. The gallery was a treasure trove of local art, paintings, sculptures, and mixed media pieces filled every available space. But Claudia bypassed it all, leading me to a back room. "This," she said, flipping on a light, "is me." I gasped. The walls were covered in photographs, stunning black and white shots of dancers, their bodies twisting and bending in impossible ways. Each image captured a moment of raw emotion, of strength and vulnerability intertwined. "You took these?" I asked, unable to hide my awe. Claudia nodded, a hint of shyness in her smile. "Photography's my first love. Dancing. That came later." I moved closer to one particularly striking image, a dancer suspended mid-air, her face a mask of determination and fear. "They're beautiful," I murmured. "Thanks," Claudia said, coming to stand beside me. "It's not exactly lucrative, but it feeds my soul, you know." I turned to look at her, struck by the passion in her voice. "Why show me this?" She shrugged, but her eyes held mine. "You said I seemed like two different people. I wanted to show you. There's more to me than just the girl on stage." The air between us felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. I cleared my throat, trying to regain my composure. "So, how'd you end up at Velvet Lights?" Claudia's expression clouded for a moment. "That's a long story. Short version, I needed the money, and it turns out I'm pretty good at taking my clothes off." There was a bitterness in her tone that made me frown. "You don't sound thrilled about it." "It's complicated," she sighed, moving away to study another photograph. "The club. It's not always what it seems." My detective instincts perked up. "What do you mean?" Claudia hesitated, chewing her lower lip. "Nothing, forget I said anything. It's just, some of the people there, they're not exactly on the up and up, you know?" I did know. Or at least I suspected. It was why I was undercover in the first place. But I couldn't tell her that. Instead, I just nodded, filing the information away for later. "Enough about work," Claudia said, her usual spark returning. "Tell me about you, Eva. What makes you tick?" I froze, caught off guard. My cover story was well rehearsed, but in that moment, faced with Claudia's open curiosity, I found myself wanting to tell her the truth. "I'm not very interesting," I hedged. "Just a boring office drone by day, occasional club goer by night." Claudia snorted. "Bullshit. I've seen you in action, remember? You're no shrinking violet." I laughed, grateful for the out. "All right, you got me. I dabble in martial arts. Self-defense, you know?" Claudia hummed, stepping closer. "A woman of hidden talents. I like that." My breath caught as she invaded my personal space, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and intoxicating. "What else are you hiding, Eva?" she murmured, her eyes searching mine. I swallowed hard, torn between the urge to pull her closer and the need to maintain my cover. I don't usually." Claudia's smile softened. "Relax, sugar. I'm not going to bite, unless you ask nicely." The tension broke and I found myself laughing. "You're incorrigible, you know that?" "Part of my charm?" She winked, but then grew serious. "Look, I like you, Eva, and I think you like me too. But I get the feeling you're holding back." I opened my mouth to protest, but she held up a hand. "It's okay. We've all got our secrets. I just want you to know, when you're ready to let your guard down, I'll be here." The sincerity in her voice made my chest ache. I wanted to tell her everything. About the case, about my fears, about the way she made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Instead, I simply nodded. "Thank you," I whispered. Claudia smiled, then leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. It was chaste, almost innocent, but it sent sparks shooting through my entire body. "Come on," she said, pulling away. "I'll walk you home." As we made our way back through the quiet streets, hand in hand once again, I found myself at a crossroads. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to pull back, to remember my mission and the dangers of getting too close. But another part, a part I'd long ignored, whispered of possibilities, of warmth and connection, and the thrill of the unknown. When we reached my apartment, Claudia squeezed my hand once before letting go. "Sweet dreams, Eva," she said softly. I watched her walk away, bathed in the glow of streetlights, and made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd dig deeper into the club's activities. I'd be the detective I was trained to be. But tonight, I'd let myself dream of blue eyes and gentle kisses, and the promise of something more. As I climbed the stairs to my lonely apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a dangerous line. One misstep, and everything could come crashing down. But for the first time in years, I found myself willing to risk the fall. The aroma of vanilla and cinnamon filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and the clatter of baking sheets. I stood in the middle of Lexington's community center, surrounded by a sea of flour-dusted aprons and determined faces. How the hell did I end up here? "Oh, right, Claudia. You're holding that whisk like it might bite you," her voice teased from behind me. I turned to see her grinning, a smudge of flour on her cheek making her look impossibly adorable. "Yeah, well, baking's not exactly my forte," I grumbled, eyeing the lumpy batter in my bowl with suspicion. Claudia laughed, coming to stand beside me. "Relax, it's just a friendly competition. Besides, I've got a secret weapon," she winked, pulling a small vial from her pocket. "What's that? Performance-enhancing vanilla?" "Better," she grinned. "My grandmother's secret extract blend. Guaranteed to make even the most disaster-prone baker shine." As she leaned in to add a few drops to my batter, I caught a whiff of her perfume, the same intoxicating scent from the art gallery. My heart did a little flip. "There," Claudia said, stepping back. "Now stir like you mean it, sugar." I did as instructed, trying to ignore the warmth that spread through me at her casual endearment. "Focus, Eva. You're here to gather intel, not moon over a pretty girl." But as the day wore on, my resolve weakened. Claudia was magnetic. The way she effortlessly charmed everyone around her, the little furrow between her brows as she concentrated on decorating her cupcakes, the triumphant grin when her creation came out of the oven perfectly golden. "Time's up," the judge called out, startling me from my Claudia-induced haze. I looked down at my own sad attempt at baking, lopsided cupcakes with frosting that looked more like a crime scene than decoration. Claudia peered over my shoulder and let out a snort of laughter. "Oh, honey," she managed between giggles, "those are something else." I felt my cheeks heat up. "Hey, I never claimed to be Martha Stewart." "No kidding," she teased, but her eyes were warm. "Come on, let's go face the music." As we lined up for judging, Claudia slipped her hand into mine and gave it a reassuring squeeze. The simple gesture sent a jolt through me, and I found myself squeezing back. To absolutely no one's surprise, Claudia's raspberry lemon cupcakes won first prize. My disaster creations, on the other hand. And the prize for most creative interpretation goes to Eva Sinclair, the judge announced, trying and failing to keep a straight face. I groaned, burying my face in my hands as Claudia howled with laughter beside me. "Oh, come on," she said, pulling my hands away. "It's not that bad. In fact." She leaned in close, her breath tickling my ear. "I think it's kind of adorable." My heart skipped a beat at her nearness. When had this happened? When had I started reacting to her like some lovesick teenager? As the crowd dispersed, Claudia linked her arm through mine. "What do you say we go celebrate our mutual victory?" I raised an eyebrow. "Mutual?" "Of course," she grinned. "You won most creative, I won best taste. Clearly, we're unstoppable together." The way she said together made my stomach flutter. Dangerous territory, Eva. But I found myself nodding anyway. "Lead the way." We ended up at a small park near the community center, sharing Claudia's award-winning cupcakes as the sun began to set. "Okay," I admitted around a mouthful of heaven. "These are incredible." Claudia beamed. "Told you. Grandma Monroe's secret weapon never fails." As we talked and laughed, I felt the walls I'd carefully constructed start to crumble. Claudia had a way of making me forget about the case, about my cover, about everything except the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. "You've got a little," Claudia said suddenly, reaching out to brush a crumb from the corner of my mouth. Her touch lingered, and I found myself leaning into it. Time seemed to slow as her gaze dropped to my lips. My heart pounded in my chest as she inched closer, her intention clear. At the last second, I turned my head, her lips grazing my cheek instead. "I'm sorry," I breathed, hating the flash of hurt in her eyes. I can't. Claudia pulled back, her expression unreadable. Right, of course, I shouldn't have assumed. No, it's not that, I said quickly. I'm just not ready for anything, with anyone. It wasn't entirely a lie. The thought of getting involved with someone while undercover terrified me. But the bigger truth, that I was scared of how much I wanted her, stayed lodged in my throat. Claudia nodded slowly. I get it. Really, I do. Just, don't shut me out completely, okay? The vulnerability in her voice made my chest ache. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. I won't, I promise. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to deep purple. As the first stars began to appear, Claudia squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, she said softly, I think you're pretty amazing, Eva Sinclair. Baking skills notwithstanding. I laughed, grateful for the break in tension. Yeah, well, you're not so bad yourself, Monroe. As we walked back to our respective homes, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice. One step forward and I'd fall, hard and fast, with no guarantee of a soft landing. But for the first time in my life, the thought of falling didn't terrify me. It exhilarated me. Back in my apartment, I stared at the case files spread across my desk. The club, the investigation, my duty, it all seemed so far away now. I picked up a photo of Claudia, taken during surveillance. Her smile, even frozen in time, made my heart race. What am I doing? I whispered to the empty room. I didn't have an answer. But as I fell asleep that night, the taste of raspberry lemon on my lips, and the memory of Claudia's almost kiss playing on repeat, I realized I was in way over my head. And I wasn't sure I wanted to surface. The thrum of victory pulsed through the air as we left the community center. Claudia's environmental group had just secured a major win. The city council had finally agreed to protect a significant portion of Lexington's wetlands. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of triumph and relief as she turned to me. We did it, Eva, she exclaimed, her smile radiant. God, I could kiss you right now. My heart stuttered at her words, remembering our almost kiss in the park. Rain check? I managed, trying to keep my tone light. Claudia's gaze softened, a hint of something unreadable flickering across her face. Actually, she said, her voice lowering, why don't you come back to my place, to celebrate properly? Warning bells clanged in my head, but the pull I felt towards her was impossible to ignore. Lead the way, I heard myself say. Claudia's apartment was exactly what I'd imagined. Eclectic, artistic, with photographs and half-finished canvases scattered about. She busied herself in the kitchen while I wandered, taking in the details of her life. Here, she said, returning with 2 glasses of wine. A toast to saving the world, one frog at a time. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. To the frogs, I echoed. As we sipped our wine, a comfortable silence settled between us. Claudia's gaze was intense, and I found myself unable to look away. Ava, she said softly, setting down her glass. Can I ask you something? I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. What are you so afraid of? The question caught me off guard. I don't. Claudia moved closer, her hand coming to rest on my arm. I see the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. I feel the spark between us. But every time we get close, you pull away. Why? I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by her nearness, by the truth of her words. It's complicated, I whispered. Then uncomplicate it, she urged. Talk to me, Eva. Please. And suddenly, I wanted to. I wanted to tell her everything, about the case, about my fears, about how she made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. I'm not. I started, struggling to find the right words. I've never felt this way before. About anyone, let alone a woman. It scares me. Claudia's expression softened. Oh, honey, that's okay. It's normal to be scared. Is it? I laughed bitterly. I'm a grown woman, for Christ's sake. I should have this figured out by now. Says who? Claudia challenged. There's no timeline for discovering yourself, Eva. No rulebook for when or how you're supposed to feel. Her words washed over me, soothing a fear I hadn't even realized I was carrying. I don't want to mess this up, I admitted. Claudia's hand moved to cup my cheek, her touch impossibly gentle. The only way to mess this up is to not try at all. And then she was kissing me, soft and sweet and achingly tender. It was nothing like I'd imagined, and everything I'd been craving. I melted into her, my hands finding purchase on her hips as she deepened the kiss. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, Claudia rested her forehead against mine. "Was that okay?" she murmured. I nodded, unable to form words. It was more than okay. It was earth-shattering. What followed was a blur of sensation, heated kisses, exploring hands, whispered endearments. Claudia led me to her bedroom, pausing at the threshold. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," she assured me. But I was tired of holding back, tired of being afraid. I pulled her close, pouring everything I couldn't say into a searing kiss. What happened next was a revelation. Claudia's touch was electric, igniting parts of me I didn't know existed. She was patient, gentle, guiding me through each new experience with a reverence that brought tears to my eyes. Afterwards, as we lay tangled in her sheets, Claudia traced lazy patterns on my skin. "You okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, feeling more okay than I had in years. "That was..." "Yeah," Claudia agreed, a smile in her voice. "It was..." As the night deepened, we talked, really talked. I told her about my fears, my insecurities. She shared stories of her own journey of self-discovery, of the challenges she'd faced in embracing her sexuality. "It's not always easy," she admitted. "But it's worth it. Being true to yourself. There's no greater freedom." I thought about my job, about the web of lies I was tangled in. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. "Hey," Claudia said, noticing my change in mood. "Where'd you go just now?" I forced a smile. "Nowhere, just processing, I guess." She studied me for a moment, then pulled me closer. "Whatever you're dealing with, Eva, you don't have to face it alone. Not anymore." Her words, meant to comfort, only twisted the knife of guilt deeper. But as I lay there, wrapped in her warmth, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I'd find a way to come clean, to tell her everything, consequences be damned. But for now, in the quiet darkness of Claudia's room, I let myself believe in the possibility of a future where I could have both, my duty and this unexpected beautiful connection. As I drifted off to sleep, Claudia's steady heartbeat beneath my ear, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, living a lie, and yet I'd never felt more authentic. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight was ours. The morning light filtered through Claudia's curtains, painting her skin in a soft golden glow. I watched her sleep, guilt gnawing at my insides. How could I tell her the truth without losing her? My phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A text from my handler. "Meeting, 1 hour, usual spot." Reality came crashing back. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Claudia, and left a hastily scribbled note. "Early meeting. Call you later. Last night was amazing. E." An hour later, I sat in a nondescript cafe, nursing a coffee that tasted like tar. My handler, a gruff man named Mike, slid into the seat across from me. "We've got movement," he said without preamble. "The syndicate's planning something big at Velvet Lights. Tonight?" My stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" Mike's eyes were grim. "Arms deal, big one. We need you there, Sinclair, front and center." I nodded, pushing thoughts of Claudia aside. This was why I was here. The case, the job. "One more thing," Mike added, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "You've been spending a lot of time with that dancer, Monroe." I kept my face neutral. "She's a potential witness. I'm cultivating a relationship." Mike snorted. "Just make sure that's all it is. We can't afford any complications." The warning was clear. I mumbled some reassurances and left, my mind racing. How could I keep Claudia safe and do my job? Back at my apartment, I stared at my phone. 3 missed calls from Claudia, a text, "Last night was amazing. Dinner tonight?" I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to call her back, to spill everything. Instead, I texted, "Can't tonight. Work emergency." "Rain check?" Her reply was almost immediate. "Everything okay?" "No," I wanted to say. "Nothing's okay. I'm lying to you, I'm in danger, and I think I'm falling in love with you." Instead, I typed, "Just busy. Talk soon." I spent the rest of the day preparing, pushing thoughts of Claudia to the back of my mind. But as night fell and I made my way to Velvet Lights, dread settled in my stomach like lead. The club was packed, the air thick with smoke and pulsing music. I scanned the crowd, looking for familiar faces, potential threats, and then I saw her. Claudia was on stage, her body moving in a hypnotic rhythm. But something was off. Her usual confident smile was gone, replaced by a tightness around her eyes that spoke of fear. Our gazes locked, and I saw recognition flash across her face, followed quickly by confusion. Shit, I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. As she finished her set, I saw her speaking urgently to another dancer. Then she was making her way towards me, determination in every step. "Ava?" she hissed, grabbing my arm. "What the hell are you doing here?" I opened my mouth, searching for a lie, but the words wouldn't come. "Claudia, No," she cut me off, her eyes darting nervously around the club. "You need to leave, now. It's not safe." My heart rate spiked. "What do you mean? Claudia, what's going on?" She bit her lip, conflict clear on her face. "I can't. Just trust me, okay? You need to go." But it was too late. Over Claudia's shoulder, I saw them. 3 men, moving with purpose towards a back room. One of them I recognized from surveillance photos, a high-ranking member of the syndicate. "I can't leave," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Claudia, listen to me. I'm not who you think I am." Her eyes widened, a mix of hurt and realization dawning. Oh God, you're a cop, aren't you?" I nodded, hating the pain I saw in her eyes. "Undercover." "Claudia, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but..." "Save it," she snapped, but there was more fear than anger in her voice. "Eva, you don't understand. These men, they're dangerous. If they find out who you are..." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "That's why I'm here, to stop them." Claudia shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "You can't. You don't know what they're capable of." "But you do," I realized, the pieces falling into place. "Claudia, what do you know?" She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Too much," she whispered. "I've seen things, heard things. I wanted out, but they wouldn't let me go." My heart broke for her, even as my mind raced with the implications. "Tell me everything," I urged. And she did. In hushed whispers, Claudia laid out the syndicate's operations, the arms deals, the money laundering, all centered around Velvet Lights. She'd been trapped, forced to turn a blind eye or risk everything. "Why didn't you come to the police?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Claudia laughed bitterly. "And say what? That I'd been complicit in their operations for years? That I was too scared to speak up?" I wanted to hold her, to promise her that everything would be okay. But we were running out of time. "Claudia, listen to me," I said, my voice urgent. "I need your help. We can take them down, but I can't do it alone." She stared at me, conflict clear in her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," I said softly. "But I'll protect you. I promise." For a moment I thought she'd refuse. Then she squared her shoulders, a familiar determination settling over her features. "What do you need me to do?" I outlined a quick plan, praying it would work. As Claudia moved to take her position, I grabbed her hand. "Be careful," I whispered. She nodded, then surprised me by pulling me in for a fierce kiss. "You too," she breathed against my lips. As I watched her disappear into the crowd, my heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. This was it. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, came down to this moment. But as I moved towards the back room, my gun a comforting weight against my hip, one thought overshadowed all others. Please, let Claudia be safe. The next few minutes would change everything. I just prayed we'd both make it out alive. The back hallways of Velvet Lights were a maze of shadows and pulsing bass. I moved silently, my heart thundering in my chest. Ahead, I could hear muffled voices, the syndicate members, no doubt finalizing their deal. A hand grabbed my arm and I nearly jumped out of my skin. But it was just Claudia, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "They're in there," she whispered, nodding towards a door at the end of the hall. "3 of them, plus the buyer." I squeezed her hand. "You've done enough. Get out of here. Call this number." I pressed a card into her palm. "Tell them Detective Sinclair needs backup." Claudia hesitated. What about you? I'll be fine, I lied, forcing a smile. Go, please. She searched my face for a moment, then did something that nearly broke me. She kissed me, hard and desperate, like it might be the last time. Don't you dare die, she breathed against my lips. Then she was gone, leaving me alone in the hallway with nothing but my gun and a prayer. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Then I kicked in the door. Police, freeze. The next few minutes were chaos. Gunshots echoed off the walls, deafening in the small space. I dove for cover, returning fire when I could. I caught a glimpse of one of the syndicate members going down, clutching his shoulder. But I was outnumbered, and they knew it. As I reloaded, I heard a chilling click behind me. Drop it, cop, a gravelly voice commanded. I turned slowly, raising my hands. The leader of the syndicate, a man I knew only as Russo, stood there, his gun trained on my head. Well, he sneered. Looks like we've got ourselves a rat. I said nothing, my mind racing for a way out of this. But Russo just laughed. You know, I had a feeling about you, he said, circling me like a shark. Too clean, too curious. Should have trusted my gut and put a bullet in you weeks ago. Why don't you do it now? I challenged, buying time. Where the hell was my backup? Russo's grin was feral. Oh, I will, but first I want to know who else knows about our operation. Your little dancer friend, perhaps? My blood ran cold. Claudia. Leave her out of this, I growled. Russo's eyes lit up. Ah, struck a nerve, have I? Bring her in, boys. To my horror, two of his goons dragged Claudia into the room. She was struggling, her eyes wild with fear when they landed on me. Eva, she cried out. Isn't this sweet? Russo mocked. The cop and the stripper, like something out of a bad movie. I lunged forward, but a sharp blow to my kidneys sent me to my knees. Now, Russo said, pressing his gun to Claudia's temple, you're going to tell me everything you know, or I'm going to paint these walls with your girlfriend's brains. Time slowed. I saw the terror in Claudia's eyes, heard Russo's finger tightening on the trigger. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the case, not my career, nothing but keeping her safe. Wait, I shouted. I'll tell you everything. Just let her go. Russo's grin widened. Start talking. So I did. I spilled everything, the investigation, the evidence we'd gathered, the names of my fellow officers. With each word, I saw the triumph grow in Russo's eyes. But I also saw something else, Claudia, slowly working her hands free from her bindings. I just needed to keep them distracted a little longer. And the files are hidden in a storage locker, I finished, praying Claudia was ready. I can take you there. Russo laughed. You must think I'm stupid, detective. No, I think we'll just kill you both and be done with it. He raised his gun, and I tensed, ready to make my move. But Claudia beat me to it. With a cry of rage, she broke free, tackling Russo to the ground. His gun went off, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling. I didn't waste a second. I threw myself at the nearest goon, wrestling for his weapon. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Claudia and Russo grappling on the floor. Claudia! I yelled, finally wrenching the gun free. I tossed it to her just as Russo gained the upper hand. She caught it midair and, without hesitation, pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening. Russo's body jerked, then went still. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, like a dam breaking, sound rushed back in. Shouts from outside, the pounding of feet. My backup, finally arriving. I scrambled to Claudia's side, pulling her into my arms. She was shaking, her eyes fixed on Russo's lifeless body. It's okay, I murmured, stroking her hair. It's over. You're safe. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Ava, I killed him. You saved my life, I corrected gently. You saved both our lives. As the room filled with officers, I held Claudia close, shielding her from their curious gazes. I knew we had a long road ahead, statements to give, charges to face. But in that moment, all that mattered was that we were alive, and we were together. Hours later, after the chaos had died down and we'd given our statements, I found Claudia sitting alone in an interrogation room. She looked small, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. Hey, I said softly. She managed a weak smile. Hey yourself, detective. Ex-detective, probably, I sighed. I broke about 100 protocols tonight. Claudia's face fell. I'm so sorry, Eva. This is all my fault. If I hadn't... I silenced her with a gentle kiss. Don't, I whispered against her lips. Don't you dare apologize. You were incredible tonight. She pulled back, searching my face. What happens now? I took a deep breath. Now, we tell the truth, all of it. It won't be easy, but I promise you, I'll be right by your side through all of it. Claudia nodded, a glimmer of her old spark returning to her eyes. Partners in crime? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Partners in everything, I corrected. As we left the station hand in hand, I knew our future was uncertain. There would be trials, both literal and figurative. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. Because whatever came next, we'd face it together. The weeks following the Velvet Lights shootout were a blur of interrogations, paperwork, and sleepless nights. Claudia and I were caught in a whirlwind of legal proceedings, our lives laid bare for judges and juries to dissect. I'd been right about one thing. My career as a detective was over. The department couldn't overlook my breach of protocol, no matter how successful the operation had been. But as I sat in the chief's office, listening to him list off my transgressions, I found I didn't care as much as I thought I would. You're lucky you're not facing charges yourself, Sinclair, he growled, tossing my badge and gun onto the desk between us. I nodded, feeling strangely light. I understand, sir, and I accept the consequences of my actions. He studied me for a moment, his expression softening slightly. Off the record, you did good work, took down a major syndicate, saved lives. It's a damn shame to lose you. Thank you, sir, I said, standing to leave. As I reached the door, he called out. Sinclair? Take care of that girl of yours. She's been through hell. I smiled, thinking of Claudia. I intend to, sir. Outside the station, Claudia was waiting, a nervous smile on her face. How'd it go? I held up my empty hands. Officially unemployed. How about you? Any word from the DA? She nodded, relief evident in her eyes. They're not pressing charges, said my cooperation and what happened with Russo, it was clearly self-defense. I pulled her into a tight hug, breathing in the scent of her hair. That's great news, babe. I told you it would work out. But as we pulled apart, I could see the shadows lingering in her gaze, the nightmares that still plagued her, the guilt she carried. We both had our demons to face. Come on, I said, taking her hand. I want to show you something. We drove in comfortable silence, the Lexington skyline fading behind us as we headed out of the city. Finally, I pulled off onto a small dirt road, leading to a clearing overlooking a pristine lake. Claudia gasped as she stepped out of the car. Ava, it's beautiful. What is this place? I smiled, wrapping my arms around her from behind. It's ours. Or it could be if you want. She turned in my embrace, her eyes wide. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, suddenly nervous. I've been thinking. Maybe it's time for a fresh start, for both of us. Away from the city, away from the memories. I gestured to a small, cozy-looking cabin nestled among the trees. It needs some work, but I thought maybe we could fix it up together, make it our home. Claudia was quiet for a long moment, her eyes roaming over the peaceful scene before us. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. You do that? Leave everything behind. For me? I cupped her face in my hands, making sure she saw the truth in my eyes. Claudia, you are everything to me now. The job, the city, none of it matters without you. She surged forward, capturing my lips in a kiss that tasted of tears and hope and possibility. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against mine. Yes, she whispered. Let's do it. Let's start over. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. We threw ourselves into renovating the cabin, turning it from a run-down shack into a cozy haven. Claudia discovered a talent for woodworking, while I focused on making the place as eco-friendly as possible, a nod to her environmental passions. It wasn't always easy. We both had our moments of doubt, of fear. The nightmares didn't disappear overnight, and there were days when the weight of everything we'd been through felt crushing. But we faced it together. On the nights when Claudia woke up screaming, reliving the moment she pulled the trigger, I held her close and whispered promises of safety and love. And on the days when I found myself missing the adrenaline rush of my old job, She reminded me of the beauty in this simpler life we were building. Slowly but surely, we healed. We learned to trust again, not just each other, but ourselves. Claudia started teaching dance classes in the nearby town, her natural charisma drawing students from miles around. I found purpose in volunteering with the local sheriff's department, using my skills to help the community without the pressures of my former career. And through it all, our love deepened, growing stronger with each challenge we overcame. It was on a crisp autumn evening, almost a year after we'd moved to the lake, that I finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been burning in my heart for months. We were sitting on the dock, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. Claudia was curled against my side, her head on my shoulder. "Hey," I said softly, my heart racing. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up at me, a soft smile on her lips. "Anything." I took a deep breath, then reached into my pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Claudia's eyes widened as I opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Claudia Monroe," I began, my voice shaking slightly. "This past year has been the most challenging, terrifying, and absolutely wonderful time of my life. You've shown me what it means to be brave, to be true to yourself, to love without reservation. I can't imagine spending a single day without you by my side." Tears were streaming down Claudia's face now, but her smile was radiant. I continued, my own eyes blurring. "I know our story didn't have the most conventional start. We've faced more in a year than most couples do in a lifetime, but I wouldn't change a single moment of it, because it led me to you. So, Claudia, my love, my partner, my everything. Will you marry me?" For a heart-stopping moment, Claudia was silent. Then, with a joyous laugh, she threw her arms around me, nearly knocking us both into the lake. "Yes," she cried, peppering my face with kisses. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." As I slipped the ring onto her finger, my heart feeling like it might burst with happiness, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. From undercover detective and burlesque dancer, to partners in every sense of the word. Our story wasn't perfect. It wasn't always pretty, but it was ours, and as I held my fiancé close, watching the sun sink below the horizon, I knew that the best chapters were still to come.